Chapter 1. The key that opened the door to the apocalypse. The sound of hell opening is the sound of tearing flesh. April 13, 3:15 New Era, Blue Star, 10:42 a.m. Inside the P3 Biosafety Laboratory at the Research Institute of C University's East Campus. Based on my preliminary analysis, this newly emerged virus should be a variant of the rabies virus. After decoding the virus's genes, did you find anything? Professor Lin set down the viral culture dish in its hand and asked the three people beside it quietly. As a doctoral supervisor at C University, Professor Lin loved to increase students' interest and sense of participation by asking questions midway through work. Teacher, after decoding the DNA and RNA of the sample and comparing them, I discovered that one set of genetic information has never been recorded before. Suli pondered for a moment before saying, so I suspect that the virus appearing this time is likely a product evolved from the rabies virus combining with some newly emerged virus or an ancient virus. As a PhD student in virology, Suli's strength in its field was not to be underestimated. Suli knew well that Professor Lin was accustomed to asking questions during practical operations, so before every experiment, Suli would make full preparations in advance. Professor Lin nodded slightly and turned to ask another young girl beside it, Xiaoxie, what do you think? Xiaoxie hesitated for a moment and said, I think that the set of genes senior sister Su mentioned should come from a brand new virus, after all, it has never appeared before. Professor Lin was noncommittal and continued, Assistant Sun, what is your opinion? Assistant Sun was a middle-aged woman. Hearing this, it smiled and said, I, on the other hand, think this is more like an ancient virus. Professor Lin asked with interest, oh, why? Assistant Sun pointed to a piece of data in the report and cleared its throat, saying, I think this protein characteristic is very similar to a prion. Judging from the ancient nature of the structure, I suspect its parent strain is likely a variant from an ancient prion. Suli said with a face full of agreement, I also think that, judging from the structure, this is more like an ancient virus. Xiaoxie asked, puzzled, but why would an ancient virus suddenly appear out of nowhere? Suli explained, it is very likely because the greenhouse effect is severe, leading to global warming, which caused a large amount of Antarctic glaciers to melt. The viruses that were originally dormant under the glaciers have been reactivated. Xiaoxie nodded upon hearing this and said nothing more. The issue of global warming was brought up by the United Government almost every year, but the rectification plans were delayed again and again and could never be passed. In the end, it was a matter of interests. Suli paused and continued, currently, the main transmission route of the new rabies virus is still primarily through blood. There is no possibility of aerosol or contact transmission for the time being. Professor Lin said, that may be so, but the new virus is evolving very quickly. For the health and lives of the public, we must complete the analysis of the virus as soon as possible and develop a vaccine. By the way, Suli, has the type 4 rabies vaccine developed last time by the Bioengineering Research Institute entered the clinical trial stage? Suli replied, Phase 1 clinical trials have just begun, recruiting a total of 10 participants. There are 2 participants from our East Campus, Meng and me. Professor Lin glanced at Suli, wanting to say something but stopped, then said, Phase 1 clinical trials still carry certain risks, try not to participate yourself in the future. We must protect ourselves first to better protect others. Do you understand? Suli nodded gratefully upon hearing this and said with a smile, don't worry, teacher. It has been over a week since the vaccine injection, and there are no physical abnormalities for the time being. Professor Lin said helplessly, fine, as long as you know what you are doing. Cough, cough, cough. While the two were talking, Assistant Sun suddenly coughed violently, its body trembling, its eyes turning bloodshot, and it fell backward. Professor Lin quickly supported Assistant Sun, saying with some concern, Xiao Sun, are you okay? Suli, you seal the samples first. Xiaoxie, you help me take Assistant Sun to the infirmary. Okay, teacher. Suli glanced at Assistant Sun with some concern, then turned around and began to pack up the virus samples in the safety cabinet. Assistant Sun, what are you doing? Let go of Professor Lin quickly. A burst of exclamations accompanied by screams suddenly rang out, interrupting Suli, who was finishing up the work. Suli put down the samples in hand and stood up, looking toward where the screams came from. Seeing Assistant Sun, which was usually gentle, pushing Professor Lin to the ground, pinning it down firmly with its body, and pressing its head against Professor Lin's abdomen. Xiaoxie stood beside the two, hands pressing on Assistant Sun's shoulders, trying to pull it off Professor Lin. What's going on? Why are you fighting? Suli asked, puzzled, while walking toward the three. Blood, so much blood. Xiaoxie, who was breaking up the fight, seemed to be frightened, stepping back repeatedly until its back hit the operating table and it stopped. Careful. Suli stepped forward quickly, catching Xiaoxie, who was about to fall, but when turning around, saw an extremely horrifying scene. Professor Lin's eyes were wide open in pain, blood continuously spilling from its mouth. Professor Lin's abdomen had been ripped open, a large hole made by Assistant Sun's teeth and hands. In the horrified gazes of Suli and Xiaoxie, Assistant Sun inserted its hand into Professor Lin's chest cavity, pulled out the organs, and without hesitation, stuffed them into its mouth, chewing them in large bites. Ah, it's killing someone. It's killing someone. Xiaoxie screamed, covering its head. Perhaps it was Xiaoxie's voice that affected Assistant Sun's feeding. Assistant Sun, which had been lying on Professor Lin and eating happily, actually stood up shakily and looked toward Suli and the other. At this moment, Assistant Sun no longer had its usual elegance. Its originally fair skin had turned a bruised blue, and several black blood vessels, like earthworms, were crisscrossing across its face. The eyes that were usually full of tenderness, as if they could speak, had completely changed. The entire eyeball was bloodshot, looking like a mass of blood red. Hungry, accompanied by Assistant Sun's unconscious low growl, blood mixed with organ fragments kept dripping from the corners of its mouth, staining its white coat blood red. How could this be? Could the virus in the Research Institute have leaked? Looking at Assistant Sun's current appearance, Suli almost subconsciously associated it with the new virus they had just discussed. Ah, Xiaoxie screamed again, almost piercing Suli's eardrums. Stimulated, Assistant Sun instantly looked up, as if a switch had been flipped, and accelerated toward the two Chapter 2, losing along the way, escaping along the way. Stop screaming, let's go. Suli fought down her fear and reached out to pull Xiaoxie, trying to help her dodge Assistant Sun's pounce. Don't touch me, stay away from me. Terrified, Xiaoxie was like a frightened rabbit. She violently shook off Suli's hand and gave her a hard shove. Suli stumbled back, her lower back slamming hard against the safety cabinet. A sharp pain shot through the impact point, making her gasp. Ah, let go of me now. After pushing Suli away, Xiaoxie stood frozen in place and was tackled head-on by Assistant Sun. Once on the ground, she screamed while struggling frantically. Senior, save me, help me. Seeing this, Suli ignored the pain in her body, gritted her teeth, and tried to step forward to pull Assistant Sun away. Hungry Tilda, just as Suli reached out, Assistant Sun let out a low growl and savagely bit into Xiaoxie's neck. Under the force of Assistant Sun's powerful bite, Xiaoxie's carotid artery was severed instantly. Blood gushed wildly from the wound, dyeing the floor bright red in an instant. Senior, save. Xiaoxie's cries for help stopped abruptly. Her lips parted silently, her raised right hand dropped powerlessly, and her eyes turned lifeless as tears silently slid from the corners of her eyes. Suli's eyes were red. She desperately covered her mouth with both hands to keep from crying out, while her feet slowly stepped backward. She was heartbroken and deeply saddened, but she also knew very well that after a carotid artery is severed, a human loses consciousness in 5 seconds and will suffer cardiac arrest and brain tissue necrosis within 3 minutes due to massive blood loss. Her junior was already beyond saving. Suli suppressed her grief, retreated to the lab door, and pressed the door opening button. After quickly stepping out of the lab, she turned to look at the silent Xiaoxie, gritted her teeth, closed the isolation door, and engaged the safety lock. It wasn't because she was heartless, but because she absolutely could not die here. The news of the new virus had to be reported, otherwise, if it broke out completely, the consequences would be unimaginable. Suli walked out of the decontamination passage, took off her protective suit in the changing area, grabbed her bag and phone, closed the locker, and yanked open the laboratory door. A wave of heat, mixed with the smell of disinfectant and some indescribable stench of decay, rushed at her, making her choke and almost cough out loud. The world outside the door seemed to have been instantly adjusted to a horror movie filter. The once bright white corridor was now stained a bizarre, dark red by the emergency lights. The sharp wail of the alarm echoed through the empty corridor, but it couldn't drown out the screams rising one after another, a kind of desperate, vocal cord-tearing wail. Back up, everyone back up. At the end of the corridor, 2 uniformed security guards were brandishing high-voltage stun batons, trying to form a defensive line. Blue electric arcs, cracked, in the air, but this weak current seemed to pose no threat to those twisted figures. They just moved forward mechanically, their limbs twisted at angles no human could possibly achieve. Suli's pupils constricted sharply. Less than 10 meters away from her, a girl in a floral dress fell down. One of her high heels broke, and she fell heavily onto the blood-stained ground, letting out a shrill cry of pain. Save me, help me. The girl scrambled backward in terror, her hands clawing wildly at the ground, unaware that her nails had broken off. Just as Suli wanted to reach out to pull her, a hand with rotting skin suddenly pressed onto the girl's shoulder. A person, who had been lying in a pool of blood suddenly lifted its head. Its face was no longer recognizable, leaving only a mass of bloody flesh. It let out a low growl like a beast before feeding and lunged forward. Squelch, blood sprayed onto the white wall like an abstract painting. Suli felt her stomach churning, a strong sense of nausea rushing up her throat. She pulled back her hand and clamped it tightly over her mouth, her nails digging deep into the flesh of her cheeks, forcing herself not to make a single sound. The distance was simply too close. She knew that right now, she was like a rat hiding in the dark. Any movement could make her the next meal. She could only hold her breath, her body pressed against the cold wall, slowly inching backward. But what she didn't notice was that around the corner behind her, a figure missing an arm, with intestines dragging on the ground, was rapidly approaching her. Lizzie, just as the zombie's mangled fingers were about to touch the hem of her clothes, a petite figure rushed against the flow of the fleeing crowd like a madwoman. A handheld liquid nitrogen canister smashed with full force into the zombie's head, making a dull, crisp thud. The next second, a pair of hands grabbed Suli's arm tightly and pulled her behind. Lizzie, I finally found you. I'm so glad you're okay. You had me worried to death. The person who arrived was Suli's childhood friend and bestie, Chen Mengmeng. A petite girl wearing large framed glasses with shoulder-length hair. Their parents were family friends, so they grew up together and were admitted to C University together. However, when choosing their majors, Suli chose virology, while Chen Mengmeng chose bioengineering. No time to explain. Many people in the research institute have turned into zombies and are killing everywhere. Let's run. Without waiting for Suli to reply, Chen Mengmeng dropped the liquid nitrogen canister in her hand, grabbed Suli's hand, and ran toward the exit with the crowd. The red light of the emergency lamps flickered in the corridor. The ground underfoot was sticky and slippery, and the air was filled with a mixture of disinfectant, blood, and stench. In her ears were continuous alarm sounds and screams rising from the distance. Those sounds were short, often lasting only a moment before disappearing completely. Suli knew very well. Stop, and you die. Turn back, and you die. Even a half step slower, and you will still die. The scene in the lab was still before her eyes, the severed carotid artery, the ripped open abdomen. That was simply not something human strength could achieve. Reality offered no luck. Given the physical fitness of the two girls, facing zombies head-on was a dead end. The only way to survive was to run. Just as the two reached the corner, several blood-covered zombies suddenly emerged from the shadows and lunged straight at Suli. The distance was too close, there was no time to dodge. Suli, look out. A familiar male voice exploded. Senior Lee rushed over and used all his strength to push Suli away. Suli stumbled and fell heavily to the ground. A sharp, stinging pain shot through her ankle, making it impossible for her to stand up for a moment. The next second, Senior Lee was surrounded by several zombies and pinned to the ground. He was resisting, roaring in anger, but human strength was no match for zombies. His shoulders, arms, and chest were bitten one after another, and blood quickly soaked through his clothes. Suli, run, run. He used his last bit of strength to hold onto a zombie that was preparing to chase after them. Suli lay on the ground, her eyelashes trembling violently. She saw it clearly. Senior Lee was beyond saving. Just like Xiaoxie, just like Professor Lin. A ruptured carotid artery, torn major arteries, massive bites, there was no possibility of rescue. Crying was useless. Hatred was useless. Turning back was even more useless. She couldn't let Senior Lee die in vain, and she couldn't drag Mengmeng down. Lizzie, just as Suli struggled to stand up, Chen Mengmeng rushed back like a madwoman. Her petite and fragile body, now under the influence of adrenaline, erupted with astonishing strength, actually pulling Suli, who was 1.73 meters tall, up from the ground. Suli gritted her teeth, suppressing the sharp pain in her ankle, and was almost half dragged, half pulled as they rushed forward. The two didn't dare to look back, didn't dare to look at the scene behind them, and could only stare at the exit ahead, running frantically. The zombies, growls, dragging sounds, and chewing noises chased closely behind them. They didn't run fast, but they had the advantage of being tireless. Once caught, it was a certain death. The corridor along the way had already turned into purgatory. Someone lay on the ground, with only half a body still twitching. Someone was banging on doors and windows for help, only to be pounced on by zombies from behind the next second. The once familiar campus and familiar corridors had completely turned into a living hell within a few short minutes. Suli's mind was exceptionally clear. She was a PhD in virology, having studied countless variant strains and simulated hundreds of doomsday outbreak models. But no model had ever been more cruel than the reality before her. No buffer, no rescue, no order. Only by constantly escaping was there a chance to survive. At this moment, her heart was filled with doubts. It was clearly determined in the lab that this new virus was only bloodborne and would not spread through aerosols or air. But why did it turn the world into this in an instant? Could it be man-made? The car is parked at the east gate side entrance. Let's go down the west stairs, bypass the back door, and rush straight over. While Suli was pondering, Chen Mengmeng said, panting, speaking at an extremely fast speed. She had memorized the route by heart and dared not hesitate for a second. The two stumbled down the stairs. The stairwell was also filled with the smell of blood. Occasionally, scattered zombies wandered about. They could only hold their breath, press against the wall, try to avoid them, and not dare to make any unnecessary sounds. Once discovered, they would be surrounded. Once surrounded, they would never escape. Suli held Chen Mengmeng's hand tightly. Their palms were full of cold sweat, but they both held onto each other tightly, neither letting go. In this doomsday, they were each other's only support. The door to the first floor lobby was right in front of them. Through the glass door, the campus outside was equally chaotic, with screams, car horns, and zombie roars mixed together. Some people were driving wildly and crashing, some were abandoning their cars and running away, and even more people had fallen by the roadside. Don't stop, just rush. Sully lowered her voice, her tone terrifyingly calm. The two took a deep breath. Taking advantage of the moment two zombies at the door turned around, they lowered their bodies and, like two shadows, rushed out of the lab building and sprinted toward the direction where the car was parked at the side entrance. The wind whistled in their ears. Pain, exhaustion, fear, all were left behind. Their goal was only one: get back to the car, leave this place, and survive. As long as they ran to the car, closed the door, and started the engine, they would be temporarily safe. As long as they didn't stop, there was still a chance of survival. The roars behind them were getting closer and closer. Sully could even feel the stench of decay pressing against her back. Chapter 3. Disaster level catastrophe. Get in the car, quick. The two of them stumbled toward the parking lot. Behind them, a group of zombies was chasing, roaring. Fortunately, Chen Mengmeng had arrived early today, so the car was parked in the first spot near the entrance of the research institute. It was only a few steps away. The two of them finally managed to get into the car, safe after a close call, before the zombies could catch up. Click. As the sound of the car doors locking echoed, Sully and Chen Mengmeng both let out a sigh of relief. When facing danger, a confined space always provides a sense of security. Even if, as a hiding place, a car isn't exactly sturdy. Bang! The zombies chasing them didn't stop, slamming into the front of the car and making a slight thud. Damn you, I'll run you over. Chen Mengmeng, usually cute and soft-spoken, finally couldn't help but lose her temper, transforming into a berserk girl. With red eyes, she cursed while starting the ignition and slamming on the gas simultaneously. The car shot forward instantly. The zombie leaning against the front of the car didn't have time to react, it just stumbled back a few steps before being pulled under the car. A grinding sound followed as the car pushed and dragged the zombie under it for dozens of meters, leaving a long, black trail of blood on the ground. Chen Mengmeng gritted her teeth and slammed on the accelerator hard. The car jolted as it ran over the zombie beneath it. Let you bite people, you damn monster, I'll kill you. Chen Mengmeng glanced at the rearview mirror, still not feeling satisfied. Lizzie, what do we do now? You drive, I'll call the police, Sully replied without hesitation. No matter what, calling the police first when something happens is always the right thing to do. Hello, C-City Emergency Services. The previous call is currently being processed, please hold. Please do not hang up, wait for an operator. The busy signal kept coming from the phone, giving Sully a bad premonition. It won't go through, so even the emergency line gets busy. Because Sully had the speakerphone on, Chen Mengmeng also heard the busy signal from the phone. It must be because too many people are calling the police at the same time, that's why the line is busy, Sully guessed. What do we do now? Chen Mengmeng asked, still shaken and full of confusion. Let's go home first, it might be dangerous outside right now, Sully said after a moment of silence. Whether it was the events at the research institute or the emergency line that wouldn't connect, everything was constantly reminding Sully that something major had happened. Okay, Chen Mengmeng nodded and drove the car onto the access road. The research institute was very close to the apartment complex they rented. They just needed to follow the access road and turn right. It was about a 10-minute drive, and they didn't even need to pass a single traffic light. Today was a workday, and since it wasn't rush hour, there were basically no vehicles on the access road. Sully rested her right hand on the car door, her head bowed, tears streaming down uncontrollably. Lizzie, what's wrong? Chen Mengmeng slowed the car down gradually and gently held Sully's hand as she asked. Mengmeng, Professor Lin and the others, they're all. Sully wiped her tears and said with a trembling voice. It's okay, Lizzie, don't be too sad. No one could have predicted this would happen, it's not your fault. Chen Mengmeng squeezed Sully's sweat-drenched palm and said gently. Regardless, it's good that you're okay, and you still have me. I'll always be with you. Do you understand, older sister? Chen Mengmeng paused for a moment, then added softly. Especially that, older sister, the volume was so low that if one weren't listening carefully, one probably wouldn't have heard it at all. Sully glanced at Chen Mengmeng, her eyes filled with emotion, and her mood calmed down slightly. Just as that faint sense of warmth had barely surfaced in the car. United Government Emergency Alert. United Government Emergency Alert. United Government Emergency Alert. The in-car system suddenly made a sound, and the center console screen lit up with a red nonagonal exclamation mark. At the same time, Sully and Chen Mengmeng's phones also popped up with notifications. In order to promptly report disaster information when encountering emergency major disasters, the United Government had implanted a program into every communication terminal. This program had been in official operation since the establishment of the unified United Government on Blue Star, and over the years, it had played a major role several times when disasters occurred. Once this program was activated, all devices in the target area, including large screens in commercial plazas, subway stations, buses, elevators, car terminal displays, home televisions, personal mobile phones, and computers. As long as the device was connected to the network, it would be forcibly taken over at the same time, and the alert information released by the United Government would pop up. Sully had always known about the existence of this program, but she had never seen it appear. After all, the city she lived in was far from earthquake zones, not by the sea, and had no possibility of forest fires, so naturally, she hadn't encountered any major disasters. The sudden disaster alert system was divided into 3 levels, distinguished by orange, yellow, and red colors, representing major, severe, and disaster levels respectively. The red nonagonal exclamation mark appearing now represented exactly a disaster level sudden catastrophe. And a disaster level sudden catastrophe meant that the current region was about to face a devastating blow. Chapter 4. The situation has completely deteriorated. United Government Emergency Announcement. Recently, large-scale rabies variant virus infections have simultaneously broken out in multiple regions and cities around the globe. The United Government Ministry of Health has named it the Q virus. According to research data from the Ministry of Health, the Q virus is extremely contagious. Any normal person bitten or scratched by an infected individual will succumb within 24 hours. The main symptoms during the incubation period of this virus are high fever, chills, and generalized weakness. After the onset, patients will exhibit symptoms such as skin bruising, bloodshot eyes, and blackened, protruding veins throughout the body. They will also become restless, bloodthirsty, and extremely aggressive. Citizens of the United Government, Blue Star has reached a critical moment. To prevent further large-scale spread of the Q virus, the United Government hopes that everyone can work together to overcome these difficulties, cooperate with local departments to carry out home isolation, and wait for rescue from the United Government. Do not go out during the home isolation period, and do not make contact with anyone, so as to prevent being attacked by infected individuals and becoming infected yourself. Regarding illegal intrusions during the home isolation period, the United Government will grant every citizen the right to unlimited counterattack. Killing intruders by any means will be considered innocent. The person speaking in the video is the most powerful person on the entire Blue Star at this moment, the president of the Blue Star United Government. The broadcast voice was cold and urgent. Outside the car window, fighter jets streaked by at low altitude, their engines Roaring, black smoke rose from the distant skyline. The entire city was falling into doomsday. Chen Mengmeng's hands on the steering wheel were trembling. Li Zi, we really have encountered a biohazard. Su Li did not speak. Her fingertips were slightly cold. She is a PhD in virology and knows the terror of this virus better than anyone. The transmissibility of rabies plus the erosive nature of prions equals a nightmare for human civilization. Just then, her phone vibrated again. An encrypted text message from the research institute quietly popped up. Open black lens bracket subject 001 Su Li 8th day after type 4 vaccine inoculation. Abnormal fluctuations in vital signs detected. Please immediately initiate self-isolation and observation, and wait for further instructions. Close black lens bracket. Su Li's pupils constricted sharply. The vaccine, something went wrong. Both she and Chen Mengmeng were volunteers, test subjects. And now, the authorities had directly sent a notification of abnormal vital signs. A chill shot from the soles of her feet straight to the top of her head. Assistant sun turning, the research institute falling, the city under lockdown, the vaccine abnormality. All the clues connected frantically at this moment. Li Zi, what's wrong? Chen Mengmeng noticed something was off with her. Su Li put away her phone, suppressed the raging waves in her heart, and kept a calm face. It's nothing, let's go home first and lock the doors and windows. Now is not the time to panic. She must stay calm. The car quickly drove into the residential complex and stopped at the entrance of the underground garage elevator. The two quickly took the elevator and returned home safely after a scare. The once lively residential complex was terrifyingly quiet at this moment. Every household had their doors and windows tightly shut. Occasionally, a few shrill screams could be heard, only to quickly disappear. Su Li locked the door and immediately began contacting her parents at home. However, no matter how many times she dialed, the only sound that came from the other end was the busy signal of no one answering. Chen Mengmeng, who was on the side, was the same. Time ticked away bit by bit, and both of their hearts began to sink to the bottom. For the next few days, the two hid in their rented apartment, not daring to make a sound, but they never gave up trying to contact their families. In the blink of an eye, 7 days had passed. During these 7 days, the epidemic situation not only did not improve but instead got worse and worse. From time to time, angry curses and screams would erupt from the residential complex where Su Li lived. Clearly, many residents in the complex had turned into zombies and attacked their own families. On the streets near the complex, there were wrecked and burned vehicles everywhere. In many of the vehicles, there were zombies still strapped in with seatbelts, struggling endlessly in their seats. In the first few days, various intense gunshots, explosions, and car crashes in the city almost never ceased. But in the last 2 days, the gunshots have gradually faded away, and the entire city has fallen into an unprecedented silence. The once bustling and noisy city seemed to have turned into a dead city. The entire internet was almost entirely filled with information about Q-virus-infected individuals biting people. The number of casualties tallied daily by the United Government was growing at a geometric rate. The day before yesterday at noon, the United Government Ministry of Health had issued another announcement. The impact of the Q-virus on the human body is irreversible. All Q-virus-infected individuals are medically considered dead after the onset of the disease, becoming true walking corpses, and can never be restored to their original state. Again, from the moment the United Government issued the announcement, Q-virus-infected individuals were officially removed from the human sequence. Anyone who kills a Q-virus-infected individual is considered to be acting in legal self-defense. And according to verification by the United Government military, the only way to kill an infected individual is to blow their head off. On the internet, those Q-virus-infected individuals were commonly named zombies. Although the United Government still uses the term Q-virus-infected individual, the name zombie is clearly more accepted by netizens. After all, in many respects, this name clearly fits the reality better. Under the setting sun, Chen Mengmeng stood on the balcony, gently closing the disaster alert that popped up on her phone. Li Zi, do you think anyone will really come to save us? Watching a group of zombies wandering on the street downstairs, her tone was full of uncertainty and confusion about the future. There should be. Su Li was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said. In fact, Su Li was not sure either. After all, the current situation had become serious beyond imagination. But she could not give Chen Mengmeng a negative answer, lest she overthink things. Li Zi, what were you thinking about just now? Chen Mengmeng noticed Su Li's distraction just now. I was thinking about Senior Li. Su Li shook her head, lowering her eyes as she spoke. Su Li, run. The desperate cry of Senior Li before he died seemed to still be lingering in her ears. If someone unaware of the situation knew about this, they would definitely think this was a particularly touching life and death parting scene from a poignant love story. But in reality, even now, she didn't even know what Senior Li's full name was. She only knew his surname was Li and that he was a student of Professor Lin's friend. It wasn't that she was heartless. It was just that as the recognized beauty of the C University Medical Department, and also ranked second on the C University campus beauty list, Su Li had far too many suitors. She had once very seriously explained to every suitor. She did not plan to date, nor did she want to string anyone along, and she especially did not want anyone to do anything for her with romantic intentions. Because if you don't like someone, you don't like them, it won't change into liking them just because of what the other person did. The idea of, I like you so much, I did so many things for you, you must be with me, can at most be considered a form of moral kidnapping and has nothing to do with feelings. And she, Su Li, refused any form of moral kidnapping. But her clear and firm refusal did not have much effect, whether out of a unique sense of confidence, or being infected by the core of romance novels where she runs, he chases, and she can't fly away. Almost every boy pursuing her felt that he would be the exception who could move her and eventually win the beauty's heart. The love letters she didn't want to receive would always pile up in her locker at irregular intervals. Various flowers, chocolates, lipsticks, jewelry, and even breakfast would always be delivered to her department by different people, and regardless of whether she accepted them or not, they would drop them off and run. Perhaps for some, being liked by others is a very happy thing, but for Su Li, who had no intention of dating and was focused on her studies, this kind of being liked was not a happiness but a nuisance. And that Senior Li who saved her with his life was one of those suitors. In fact, Su Li also didn't understand why the other party could do this for her, even disregarding his own life. They only met after Su Li followed Professor Lin and transferred to the East Campus. It had been less than a year until now. Senior Li had confessed to her privately and had also given her flowers on holidays, but she did not accept them, nor did she take the flowers he sent. They had never even eaten a meal together. Yet it was such a person who, at the critical moment, saved her with his own life. Although Su Li knew that Senior Li was very likely just acting on impulse, his blood running hot without considering the consequences before rushing in. But regardless, Su Li had to accept this debt of gratitude. This debt of gratitude was always pressing on Su Li's heart, giving her a weight she couldn't bear. Li Zi, this was Senior Li's own choice. Don't feel too guilty, and don't carry too heavy a psychological burden. Chen Mengmeng sat on the sofa and leaned her head on Su Li's shoulder. No one asked him to save you. I didn't, and you didn't either. He is an adult and should be responsible for his own actions. At worst, in the future, if we have the chance to meet his family, we can just repay his family properly. She knew that saying this might be a bit morally skewed and heartless, but she was Suli's friend, and since things had reached this point, she had to stand on Suli's side to comfort her. Otherwise, Suli wouldn't be able to get past her own mental hurdle, and her emotions would always be very suppressed, which in an environment like the apocalypse the consequences would be fatal. This was definitely not what Chen Mengmeng wanted to see. Suli heard this and was silent for a moment, then said, Mengmeng, if I encounter danger in the future, you must not. Chen Mengmeng covered Suli's mouth with her hand, knocked on Suli's head, and said, what nonsense are you talking about? If you are in danger, of course I will save you, we are best friends. And if I encounter danger, wouldn't you save me? Of course I would save you, Suli said without hesitation. Then that's it, stop rambling, this doesn't sound like you at all. Chen Mengmeng rolled her eyes at Suli and said huffily, City C Government Emergency Announcement. City C Government Emergency Announcement. City C Government Emergency Announcement. Suli opened her mouth, just about to say something, when her phone suddenly emitted a notification sound, followed immediately by a video popping up. Chapter 5. Preparing to evacuate. Hello to all citizens of C City, I am C City Mayor Li Tianming. I am here to convey a grave message. Due to the severe spread of the epidemic, the number of Q virus infected individuals has increased significantly. Currently, the number of infected in C City exceeds 2/3 of the total population, and the United Government can no longer effectively control the situation in the city. Due to the surge in the number of infected, the pressure on urban defense is immense, resulting in heavy casualties for the local garrison. I regret to inform you all that within the next 2 days, the local garrison will abandon the power plant and water treatment plant and fully evacuate the city. This means that at most, after 2 days, the entire C City will face the predicament of water and power outages due to a lack of maintenance. However, there is no need to worry, I have some good news to share. The C City survivor base that we have constructed in the eastern suburbs is now basically complete. The base has fully functional water and power facilities and is ready for survivors to move in at any time. A vaccine for the Q virus is currently being urgently developed at the base, and perhaps it won't be long before we have good news. I have already sent the specific location of the base to everyone via the built-in program. I will be waiting for your arrival at the C City survivor base. Good luck to everyone. After watching the video, Chen Mengmeng said with some disbelief, why wasn't there an evacuation plan in the announcement? Does he mean that we need to travel to the base on our own? Suli nodded and said, I'm afraid so. Chen Mengmeng said indignantly, what kind of international joke is this? If they make us go by ourselves, we'll be swallowed alive by zombies. Suli gave a wry smile and explained softly. According to data from the beginning of the year, the current resident population of C City is about 16 million. According to the United Government's estimates, more than 2/3 of the entire population of C City has been infected, which means that 11 million people in C City have now turned into zombies. Suli paused for a moment and asked, but do you know how many garrison troops there are in the entire C City? How many? Chen Mengmeng shook her head. She didn't usually pay much attention to such things, so naturally, she didn't know the answer. Suli sighed and said, fewer than 6,000, and that doesn't even exclude those who have been infected. 6,000 against 11 million, even if they all had 3 heads and 6 arms, there would be no chance of winning. Suli paused for a moment and continued to explain, the most important thing for the United Government right now is to defend the survivor base well. If the survivor base falls, everyone will lose their last foothold. Preserving limited forces and placing them in the most important positions is the right decision. Furthermore, human nature is the hardest thing to control. Keeping everyone together allows for mutual restraint and supervision, which can at least maintain the current situation for a short time. But if the garrison troops were split up and sent out, everyone would lack supervision, and it would be hard to say what might happen then. Upon hearing this, Chen Mengmeng nodded in agreement and then asked, then what should we do? Should we evacuate, or stay in the city? Maybe we should wait and see the situation before making a decision. Suli shook her head and said, no, we must evacuate, and the sooner the better. There isn't much food at home right now. Those little breads and biscuits will last us at most 2 or 3 days. In 2 days, when the water and power are cut off, we won't even have tap water to drink. The two of us lack the ability to go out and scavenge for supplies. If we continue to stay in the city, even if we aren't bitten to death by zombies, we will be starved or dehydrated to death. Suli stroked Chen Mengmeng's head and said softly, Mengmeng, rather than sitting and waiting for death, it's better to fight for survival. No one is coming to save us now, we can only save ourselves. Don't worry, as long as I have a breath left, I will definitely get you to the base safely. Chen Mengmeng looked up at Suli, reached out to hug her, and said in a soft, sweet voice, okay, then when are we leaving? Now. Suli gently patted Chen Mengmeng's back and said softly, alright, let's pack our things first. After saying that, Suli went back to her room, took out a mountaineering backpack, and started stuffing things inside. Chen Mengmeng naturally followed suit. Since both of them were girls, their carrying capacity was quite average. Coupled with the fact that there were zombies everywhere outside, a backpack that was too heavy would hinder their escape, so they didn't bring too many things. The backpacks basically contained a few sets of clothes, some food like biscuits, beef jerky, chocolate, a few bottles of water, and common medicines from the family first aid kit. It wasn't that Suli didn't want to bring more supplies, but as things stood, survival was above all else. As for the future, they would take it one step at a time. Hello, the number you have dialed is temporarily unavailable. Please try again later. Before leaving, Suli called her parents again, but there was still no answer on the other end. Are you still unable to reach your uncle and aunt? Chen Mengmeng asked in a low voice. Yeah. Suli put down her phone and sighed softly. What about Uncle Chen and the others? Have you reached them? I can't reach my parents either. Chen Mengmeng shook her head, her expression somewhat dejected. The two looked at each other and said nothing more. In fact, back on the first day, when they couldn't get through on the phone, they had already prepared for the worst. In this doomsday, no one could guarantee anything, including themselves. They could lose their lives at any moment. Alright, let's not think about that anymore. Let's get ready to leave. Suli put away her phone and tried her best to sound upbeat. She was the older sister. In the current situation, she had to be strong and set a good example for Chen Mengmeng. It was early summer, yet Suli wrapped herself up tightly. She wore a thick hooded windbreaker, thickened jeans reaching her ankles, and had thick books wrapped around her arms with tape. According to the United Government, being bitten or scratched by a zombie would lead to infection, so wearing thicker clothing was always somewhat useful. At the very least, it could reduce the chance of getting scratched. The books tied to her arms served as arm guards. As everyone knows, stacked paper actually has amazing defensive capabilities. If a zombie tried to bite her, she would shove the books on her arms into the zombie's mouth. Of course, if she were unfortunately tackled and swarmed by zombies, Suli hoped the zombies would bite her neck first. Better to die quickly and be reincarnated than to suffer too much. Li, are you afraid? Chen Mengmeng, who was dressed in the same gear as Suli, tightened her grip on her weapon, a sharpened clothes-drying pole, and asked in a whisper while pressed against the door frame. Don't be afraid, I will protect you. Suli didn't answer Chen Mengmeng's question. Instead, she pressed her forehead against hers and said with a smile. After we go out in a moment, you must stay close to me. Okay. Chen Mengmeng's little face turned red, and she nodded. Suli observed the outside through the peephole for a while, and after confirming there were no zombies at the door, she said to Chen Mengmeng, open the door. Upon hearing this, Chen Mengmeng quickly opened the door. The next second, Su Li, holding a pot lid in her left hand and a kitchen knife in her right, with a mountaineering backpack on her back, dashed out of the room. Chapter 6, Parking Garage. Safe. Su Li scanned the empty hallway, breathed a slight sigh of relief, and beckoned to Chen Mengmeng. Chen Mengmeng hurriedly followed, asking in a low voice, Li Zi, how are we going to get downstairs? Su Li hesitated for a moment and said, I'll go check the stairwell first. Having said that, Su Li walked to the stairwell's fire door and gently pushed it open a crack. The stairwell was completely silent. Bang! Su Li thought for a moment, then used her kitchen knife to strike the fire door hard. The sound of the impact rapidly spread through the narrow stairwell, like a pebble tossed into still water, instantly shattering the previous silence. Tilda. The next moment, a chorus of low growls, accompanied by noisy footsteps, came from below. Su Li was startled and hurriedly shut the fire door. Fortunately, she was quick-witted and didn't just take the stairs, opting instead to beat the grass to startle the snake and check the situation in the stairwell first. Otherwise, given the physical stamina of Su Li and Chen Mengmeng, if they had run into a horde of zombies in the narrow stairwell, they probably would have been done for on the spot. There are a lot of zombies in the stairwell. We'll take the elevator down, Su Li said, forcing herself to appear calm. She didn't choose to fight her way down the stairs. Instead, she chose to take a gamble, betting that the elevator lobby on the second basement level wasn't surrounded by zombies. She knew very well that with their weak arms and legs, she and Chen Mengmeng didn't have the ability to confront a horde of zombies head-on. You go back to the doorway first and be ready at all times. If there are zombies in the elevator, you close the door immediately, Su Li whispered to Chen Mengmeng. I closed the door, but what about you? Chen Mengmeng looked completely disapproving. It's okay, the precious blade in my hand isn't just for show, Su Li said, waving the kitchen knife in her hand. Ha, and is my long spear just for show? Chen Mengmeng rolled her eyes at Su Li and poked the elevator button with her closed drying pole. 12, 13, 14, the numbers on the elevator changed constantly under their gaze. Su Li's heart beat faster and faster, and her palms, gripping her weapon and shield, began to sweat. Chen Mengmeng held the closed drying pole high, pointing the sharpened end toward the elevator door, her small face serious, as if ready to stab a zombie's head at any moment. 15. The elevator finally stopped on the floor where they were. Su Li held her breath, raised the pot lid in front of her with her left hand, tightened her grip on the kitchen knife in her right, and stared intently at the slowly opening elevator. The aluminum lid of the steamer wasn't large, nor was it particularly sturdy, but at this moment, it gave Su Li an inexplicable sense of security. Perhaps it was like in horror movies where the protagonists like to hide in wardrobes, it was all about psychological comfort. The elevator door opened completely. The scene she imagined, a horde of zombies rushing out, did not happen. The elevator was empty, there wasn't even a ghost in sight. Safe. Mengmeng, hurry in. Su Li leaned half her body into the elevator and waved the pot lid at Chen Mengmeng. The comical scene made Chen Mengmeng couldn't help but smile. Coming, Chen Mengmeng put away her long spear, turned back to slam the apartment door shut, thought for a moment, then took out her key to lock it before running into the elevator. After the two entered the elevator, they pressed the B2 button, and the elevator began to descend rapidly. After we get out, if there are zombies at the elevator entrance, press the 15th floor button, then hide behind me, understand? Su Li whispered into Chen Mengmeng's ear. Okay, Chen Mengmeng nodded. I will protect you well, Su Li said, holding the kitchen knife vertically in front of her chest with a serious expression. You need to protect yourself too, Chen Mengmeng said softly. Just as they were speaking, the elevator arrived at the second basement level. There were no zombies at the elevator entrance. Su Li used her arm to push Chen Mengmeng behind her, cautiously poked her head out of the elevator, and only after confirming the elevator lobby was safe did she wave to Chen Mengmeng. The two tiptoed along the elevator lobby wall, slowly moving outward. The second basement level was unusually quiet at this moment, they could barely hear a sound. Su Li held the pot lid in front of her and walked slowly toward the vehicles. Chen Mengmeng held the closed drying pole, walking backward with her back to Su Li to prevent any zombies from suddenly appearing behind them. Bang! They had only walked half the distance when a cat, appearing from nowhere, suddenly rushed out from a corner and collided with an electric scooter in the charging area. Beep, beep, beep. Before they could react, a piercing alarm sound rang throughout the entire second basement level. Tilda. A series of low growls came from the distance. Su Li looked up and saw dozens of zombies rushing out from a corner ahead. Run. Su Li dropped the pot lid in her hand, grabbed Chen Mengmeng's hand, and ran back, trying to retreat to the elevator lobby. At this moment, the elevator should still be at B2, and the zombies were still some distance away. As long as they were fast enough, they could get back to the 15th floor before the zombies got up. Tilda. Just as they started running back, Su Li saw another group of zombies rushing out from the direction of the elevator lobby, blocking their path. Run that way. Chen Mengmeng pointed to a small door near a trash can not far away. That was the utility room on the second basement level, where the cleaning ladies usually stored their cleaning tools. No, that room has no other exit. If we go in, we'll be trapped inside, and that door is very fragile, the zombies will break through it. Su Li climbed onto the hood of an SUV and reached out to Chen Mengmeng, saying, we'll jump across the car roofs. Although walking on car roofs wasn't necessarily safe, it was better than being surrounded by zombies on the ground. Follow me closely, be careful. Su Li pulled Chen Mengmeng onto the car, jumped to the roof of the adjacent car, and turned back to instruct her. Chen Mengmeng looked at her own short legs, then at the rapidly approaching horde of zombies, gritted her teeth, and followed by jumping over. Fortunately, the parking spaces in the underground garage were drawn tightly, so the vehicles were close to each other. Plus, with a relatively light load, Chen Mengmeng managed to land successfully on the roof of another car. The two fled frantically across a row of cars. Dozens of zombies growled and clawed as they chased, appearing from all directions, front, back, left, and right. Don't stop. If we get surrounded, it's over, Su Li shouted while running. Once they stopped and were surrounded by zombies, it would be difficult to leave the car roofs. By then, if they wanted to jump off the cars to escape, they would easily be grabbed by the feet by the zombies and dragged down. A thrilling chase was passionately unfolding on the second basement level. Su Li didn't pause for a second, successfully jumping all the way to the roof of Chen Mengmeng's car. Without hesitation, she raised the kitchen knife and smashed it down toward the car's panoramic sunroof. There was no other way. Although Chen Mengmeng's car had a sunroof, it couldn't be opened. It was just a solid, immovable piece of large glass, so she had no choice but to smash it. Bang! After a dull thud, an awkward thing happened.